South Africa's struggle to deal with its racist past may actually hold some very significant lessons for us here in the United States. This is a report by Debora Patta. She's in Johannesburg, and she takes a look at how the nation faced the trauma and how it continues to tackle it moving forward.
This is Constitutional Hill. It used to be a prison where former President Nelson Mandela was held during his treason trial. He believed that no one was born hating another person because of their race, and despite 27 years behind bars, he forgave his jailers and tried to reconcile this country after decades of brutality. This is what state-sanctioned police killings looked like under South Africa's racist regime. Known as the Trojan Horse Massacre, white policemen hid inside wooden crates and opened fire on unarmed protesters, killing 3 of them, the youngest, an 11-year-old boy. The incident was captured by CBS News in an age before cell phone cameras. This type of brutality was rarely caught on film. Which is why over 3 decades later, the police killing of George Floyd still takes an emotional toll on black South Africans who find themselves reliving the trauma of apartheid, which legalized systematic and violent racism. That system was eventually dismantled in 1994 through a negotiated settlement.
Let freedom reign.
Under former President Nelson Mandela, the country began a process of truth-telling in a bid to heal the wounds of its racist past.
Thank you. You may be seated.
For 7 years, the Truth and Reconciliation Commission was broadcast regularly on national television, led by Nobel Peace Laureate Archbishop Desmond Tutu, who spoke to 60 Minutes' Bob Simon.
It's not easy to open wounds. It's very painful. But if you don't want them to fester, you must open them and cleanse them.
So help me God. Thank you. You may be seated.
Perpetrators like Dirk Coetzee, the leader of a state-sponsored death squad, were given amnesty in exchange for the truth. He told 60 Minutes how they routinely murdered black activists.
You guys were playing God.
We were God.
They had pulled all his hair out.
The survivors of these unspeakable atrocities were promised reparations.
Then they went about cutting his fingers off.
More than 21,000 victims testified. Even Tutu broke down and wept. Former anti-apartheid campaigner Reverend Frank Chikane nearly died after being poisoned by the apartheid government. He forgave his perpetrator.
Bitterness destroys you. It doesn't destroy the person who caused you the pain.
But he has not forgotten.
Forgiving doesn't mean forgetting. The guy who tortured me is still the guy who tortured me. It doesn't change. But my attitude against him becomes completely different.
The process was flawed. Many victims felt cheated out of justice, but it did open up a national dialogue in which white South Africans could no longer deny the crimes committed in their name. And 26 years later, race remains the enduring fault line of this country's discourse.
We have more conversations about race. Race is a conversation that never ends in our country.
Patamedi Lebia believes South Africans are better at talking about race than Americans, but reconciliation is hard if, like him, you live in a township where some residents still don't have electricity.
How do you forgive if you're still hungry? There's still this thing that stands before me, this blackness that hinders me in everything I do. How do I then, even as a new generation, say, we forgave?
You're listening to
It's an Issue radio talk show host Eusebius Makaiser confronts regularly on his show. I've heard you say that you're tired of white people coming to you and saying, what must I do? How can I be better? How can I, whatever. It's like white people need to do the work themselves.
As a black person, as a black thinker, you are expected to be the go-to person for solutions on the race question. And that is problematic, because if racism is relational, then it actually means that white people are as fluent in racism as black people. After all, it takes two to tango badly.
Mkhizer says white South Africans need to figure out for themselves how to change. And a good place to begin is with the fact that this country's economy is still in the hands of a white minority 26 years after the end of apartheid.
That really is the 1994 sin, was to decouple the racism conversation from the economic justice conversation.
So what can be learned from this country's truth-telling? There is no quick fix. Some South Africans believe the US would benefit from a similar process, and everyone agreed that you have to keep on having uncomfortable conversations, but that reconciliation is only possible if it's accompanied by economic justice. Vlad, Anne-Marie?